the bleak midwinter, frosty wind made moan, stood like iron, water was a stone. Snow was falling, snow on snow, snow on snow. In the midwinter, long, long ago. So this is where the story ends. Now I can hear you asking, what story? Well, that's glad you asked. It's the story of two beings who inhabited the same space for a while. One was an old woman. She lived down there, just a little ways, at the end of a road, which was at the end of a lane, far from the center of town. In fact, nobody came that direction, and she liked it that way. Her husband had died many years ago, and so she was happy with her existence. She only went to town occasionally to get staples that she didn't have, but mainly she was self-sufficient. She had a couple of chickens, and she had a goat, and she took care of her animals. So every day was the same. She would wake in the morning and blow on the coals that had been banked up the night before. And then she would get dressed and head out to do her chores with the animals, milk the goat, feed the chickens, collect the eggs. But every day went the same. She'd come back in. The fire would be going by that time, and the stove would be hot enough. She'd put a pot of water on to boil with maybe some oats in it to just make a thin cereal to eat. And after she'd eaten her breakfast, she would head back out to do more chores, splitting wood, taking care of the animals again, talking to the animals. She had no one else to talk to. And she always felt that they sort of understood her. And then back in for some soup and bread. And this was the way her day progressed, every single day the same. More an existence than a life. But she was contented. She'd had a good life. Now, the other was a young boy, or I'd call him a boy, a young star. Stars have their own lives, you see. We think of them as balls of plasma and gas burning up there, but they actually can communicate with each other. After all, we're nothing more than a bag of liquid and solid. So they can communicate to each other in ways that we don't understand. But this was just before Christmas one year, and you have to understand that stars understand the importance of looking their best at Christmas time. So they polish themselves. You notice that how clear the sky is, because they know people look up at Christmas. But this young star couldn't sit still. As all his aunts and uncles and cousins were getting ready, he just started causing a little ruckus and moving around and having a great time, and then his mother would go, "Stop! Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause a problem, really." I'll just sit here quietly in the corner while you finish what you're doing. I won't get in any trouble at all. Maybe I'll just sort of jump on one foot and then the other foot, and then jump around and run into all sorts of other stars and have a great time until stop! What is it with you this year? You know that this is the time of year we have to get ready for Christmas. Well, just once, I want to have a real Christmas. And his mother said, well, we do have a real Christmas. We all polish ourselves and look beautiful for those who look up at us. I said, no, I want to have a real Christmas with presents and a tree. She said, oh, well, if you do that, will you promise that you'll always behave after that? And he said, yes. Nope, no cross fingers. I guess I have to do it. And she said, fine. You see that spot down there? I said, yeah, well, it's far from town. There's nobody out there. Yes, you go down there. You can't go to the town. You go down there. And so he said, okay. Into the snow. All the heat had to dissipate into the snow, and as it melted, he got up. Well, let's go back and see this woman again. She's back in her cabin. Chores were done for the day. This happened to be Christmas Eve. So she came in to fix herself breakfast, and as she was cooking her cereal, well, she wasn't used to hearing the door knock. She lived by herself, and the only people she knew of who would come and knock on her door were the kids who might come out just on a dare to see the old witch who lived out in the woods. Well, she didn't really want to see them, so she pretended she didn't hear it. Oh, fine. She went to the door, opened the door, and said, what do you want? I came for Christmas. Okay, what's the joke? Where are the kids hiding who sent you here? Huh? No, I came for Christmas. And she really looked at him, and he was the oddest looking child she had ever seen. You know, he didn't really have a normal face. He had sort of a ball stuffed on for a nose and ears that didn't seem to quite fit the rest of him, and his mouth kind of opened funny, but oh, the poor little kid. The kids in town must have dared him to do this because he's so different. Okay, you can come in, but I don't have Christmas. I haven't had Christmas for a long time. But you can come in. And she went to put some more wood on the fire, and he came over and looked at the fire, and oh, that's so beautiful. She said, it's only a fire. Huh. But he stood there and looked at it, and his eyes seemed to glow with the flame. Well, she'd had enough of that. It was time to do some more chores. She had to go out and split the wood, so she headed out to split some wood for the next day, and the little boy traveled right behind her, just following along, not offering to help or anything, just following along. And she split the wood and piled it and carried it inside. And he just watched. And she headed back out to go talk to her chickens like she usually did in the morning. She usually went and talked to her chickens. Nothing strange, just she always felt it made them lay a little bit better. But she saw a little boy standing, and he was staring into the woods. And he said, I see one! Well, she was really nervous because what did he see? Could it possibly be a wolf or a coyote, or something coming to get her chickens. But she looked and she couldn't see anything, and he still stared. And he said, "No, right over there. Don't you see it?" "I see a tree. A Christmas tree." Well, she was a bit put out by that idea because she told him that there wasn't any Christmas around here. But she looked at the tree and it sort of did look like a little Christmas tree. She said, well, here's the saw, go and cut it down. And he said, "What?" He said, "You have to cut it down if it's going to be a Christmas tree." He said, "I don't know how." So she went over and cut it down and dragged it inside because the little boy didn't seem to be able to do anything. But he followed her inside. And she found a bucket and put some sand in it, which she kept over by the fire just in case. And she set it up in the corner. And she said, "It does sort of look like a Christmas tree." And the little boy said, "Aren't you going to decorate it?" Okay, this little boy had shown up at her door, unasked for, wanting Christmas, and not only did he not seem to be able to do anything, he wanted her to decorate the tree now. Well, that's it. No more of this. She was going to tell him to get out, and she looked at him, and he looked so innocent. Oh, it wouldn't hurt. So she went over to her bed and dragged out a box which had some old ribbons in it. And she started to make decorations with ribbons and paper. Made a paper star to put up on top. And the little boy said, "Oh, that's good. I like that." And she stood back and sort of a contented smile and looked at that tree and said, "That's a Christmas tree." And he said, "Oh, yes, it is." And they stood and admired it for a while. And then the little boy said, "What are we having for Christmas dinner?" Well, how dare he? She brought a tree in, she decorated the tree, and now he wanted Christmas dinner? Well, she was planning on having a soup that she had already made, but it was thin and old, and it really wouldn't hurt that much. She said, "Oh, well, I can make some fresh soup and maybe some fresh bread." And she started to mix up the bread so it could rise. And she mixed all the bread up, and she got all the ingredients together for the soup because she had some lentils, and she had some old ham bone which she put in, and she had some carrots and potatoes that she had in the cold cellar. And she came back in and she put them all together, and she made a wonderful soup, and it got it simmering on the stove for a long time. And as everything was cooking, the bread was rising, the little boy said, looking at the tree, "Where are the presents?" "Well, I can't be bothered to get you presents as well as a dinner plus a tree." Oh, well. And she went back, and in another box under the bed she pulled out, she had a silver belt buckle that her husband had a nice big silver belt buckle. And she said, "Well, I don't know what I'm keeping it for." And so she polished it all up and wrapped it all up and put it under the tree. And she noticed there was another present under the tree. The little boy had gone over to a corner and put something together for her. So that was pretty nice. Well, the bread was ready to go in, so she put the bread into the oven. And they headed back out. Then they were talking and laughing, and she hadn't laughed for a long time, and her first laugh sort of came out kind of broken, But he had the fullest laugh of, he would laugh, and it made her laugh more. And then they came back in, the bread was ready, the soup was ready, they sat down, and they ate their Christmas dinner together, laughing and singing and talking. The boy didn't seem to know any of the songs that she knew, but he would sing along anyway, and he had the oddest voice. He had a very broad voice that would fill the area, and it was wonderful. But then he said, "What are we having for dessert?" Well, she didn't even startle at that. This time she said, "Oh, that would be really nice." And she had some molasses, and she had some ginger, and she put together a most wonderful gingerbread cake with apples in it, and it was just wonderful, and she put it in the oven to cook. And they sat and they sang some more, all sorts of songs, anything from dashing through the snow in a one-horse open sleigh, o'er the fields we go, laughing all the way, bells on bobtail ring, making spirits bright. What fun it is to laugh and sing a sleighing song tonight. Oh, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. And they continued to sing and laugh until the gingerbread was ready to come out of the oven, and they brought the gingerbread out of the oven and sat. Oh, it smelled so good. And she went over and got some cream and poured it on the slices that she sliced off, and they sat. It was getting late at this point. And she said, "Why don't you open your present?" And she gave the present to the little boy, and he opened it, and there was that belt buckle, and he looked at it and said, "Oh, that's wonderful. I'm going to wear it forever." Oh, at least until he lost it, she was sure. But he tucked it carefully away, and then they walked over to the door and looked out, and all the stars were shining, and over the hills they could hear the bells of the church ringing. It was so peaceful and beautiful. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round yon virgin mother and child. Holy infant, so tender and mild, sleep in heavenly sleep, sleep in heavenly sleepings. And the little boy looked up and said, "I have to go. My time's done here. I have to go." And she said, oh, not yet." And he said, "Yes, I do. I have to go." And he ran off into the snow, and she watched him run into the distance, and wondering where he'd gone and where he'd come from, and did he really have a place to go, or was he just suddenly being polite in a way she hadn't seen him before? But he was gone. Well, she went back in and put on her overcoat and followed after, and she followed the footprints in the snow, and all of a sudden, right here, they ended. And she looked around, and she couldn't see anything. Then she looked up. The stars were so beautiful. And she saw one that looked sort of like the silver that she'd seen when she polished up the belt buckle. But she wasn't sure. Nah. And she turned around and went home and went to bed without even cleaning up. The next morning, she got up and she went out to do her chores after blowing on the coals to get them started. She came back in. She was about to mix her usual breakfast, but she remembered the gingerbread. really good. And she sat down to have the gingerbread, and she looked over and she saw the present under the tree as she was sitting there. Ah, he probably just put some wrapping paper around a box and left it there. And the animals had to be seen to, so she went back out to take care of the rest of her chores. And she came in and had some of the soup they'd made the day before and some of the bread, and she sat remembering a wonderful day. And by the time she'd finished the day, sitting there, she was just getting ready to go to bed when she looked over that present one more time. Well, I might as well open it. And she did. As she cracked the box open, out poured all the smells of the night before, all the sounds and the wonders and all the sights, and she had the most wonderful memories. And she closed it. She opened it again, and the same thing happened, the same smells, the same laughter. And she smiled. And she went outside, and she ran up the hill to the same spot where the feet had disappeared, and she looked up and said, "Thank you." So I hope we all find the hope and love and joy and peace this Christmas. O'er white expanses sparkling pure, the radiant morn unfolds. The night burns brighter through the cold. Of loves and every thought in vain, but deepens round the heart. And nearer sounds the angels' hymn, goodwill to all on earth.